The studio lights poured down on the Jimmy Kimmel live set, painting the stage in a vivid wash of color that seemed to pulse with the night's brewing storm. Jimmy Kimmel sauntered out, his trademark grin stretched wide across his face, but, beneath it, his eyes flickered with a keen, almost mischievous intent, like a hunter sizing up his mark. The audience, a raucous mix of die-hard fans, casual viewers, and late-night wanderers, settled into their seats, their chatter a low hum of expectation, their laughter already bubbling up at the promise of Kimmel's sharp tongue. They had no inkling that this night's monologue, delivered solo with no guest to spar against, would ignite a blaze that stretched far beyond the studio walls, targeting Donald Trump, the former president whose latest gambit had once again seized the public's gaze. What unfolded wasn't just comedy. It was a relentless dismantling, a verbal barrage that would soon provoke Trump into a tailspin of rage, setting the stage for Kimmel to emerge as the night's undisputed victor. Kimmel kicked off with a flourish, his voice rich with a biting sarcasm that rolled off his tongue like honey laced with venom, as he tore into Trump's newest spectacle. A brash declaration that he'd single-handedly reshape his legacy with. A move so audacious it defied reason. He didn't ease into it, instead plunging straight into the absurdity, his words painting Trump as a man who couldn't let go of the spotlight, a figure whose every breath seemed engineered to drown out the silence of irrelevance. The host lingered on the details, mocking the pomposity of Trump's announcement, the way it echoed with the hollow clang of a salesman peddling tarnished goods. Was this really a bid to lead, or just a tired encore from a one-man show past its prime? Who still clapped for this routine, and what did it say about a world that kept buying tickets? The audience lapped it up, their laughter swelling into a wave that crashed through the room. But Kimmel wasn't done, his rhythm building as he dug deeper into the cracks of Trump's facade. He pivoted to the former president's recent string of blunders, a cascade of legal setbacks, awkward speeches, and social media misfires that had left his image more battered than ever. With a comedian's precision, he laid out the evidence, recounting a courtroom loss that had Trump fuming in headlines, then a viral clip where his words tripped over themselves, turning a rally into a punchline. Kimmel's tone danced between glee and disdain, his delivery a masterclass in timing, each barb landing with a sting that made the crowd gasp, then roar. Did Trump not see the walls closing in, or was he too busy shouting into the void to notice? What kept him swinging when the scoreboard showed him down? The monologue gained steam, Kimmel's voice rising as he wove a tapestry of Trump's contradictions, the golden myth of invincibility clashing with a reality of stumbles and jeers. He lingered on a recent incident, a public spat where Trump's temper flared at a critic, only to backfire when the crowd turned on him, their boos a rare crack in his armor. The host milked it, his eyes gleaming with delight as he replayed the moment in vivid strokes, the audience hanging on every word, their cheers a chorus of validation. He didn't stop there, piling on with a jab at Trump's loyalists, questioning who still rallied behind a leader whose shine had dulled to a flicker. Was this devotion, or just denial dressed up as faith? The room pulsed with energy, some fans whooping, others shifting in their seats, the weight of Kimmel's words sinking in. By the first break, the studio was a live wire, the air thick with a restless charge that seemed to vibrate off the walls. Kimmel's roast had struck like a match in a dry field, the crowd feeding off his fearless cadence, their laughter and applause a testament to his command. Behind the scenes, the crew buzzed, sensing the segment's potential to ripple outward, while online, the first clips were already breaking loose, racing across platforms like sparks on a fuse. Kimmel rapped with a sly grin, tossing out a final zinger that left the audience howling, oblivious to the tempest his words were about to unleash. What had been a one-man takedown was poised to become a full-blown saga, Trump's response lurking just out of sight, a storm cloud gathering strength, Could a late-night bit really rattle a man who'd faced down nations, or was this the jab that finally broke through? As the lights dimmed for the break, the stage stood ready, the night's drama only beginning to unfold. The commercial break ended, and the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio snapped back to life, the audience still buzzing from the monologue's aftershock, their energy a tangible pulse in the room. Jimmy Kimmel stood at his desk, his posture loose but his grin carrying a sharper edge, as if he could feel the ripples of his words already crashing beyond the stage. The crowd, electrified by his earlier roast of Donald Trump, leaned in, hungry for more, unaware that the real fireworks were igniting. Far from their seats, Trump, holed up somewhere in his orbit, had caught wind of the takedown, and the response that erupted was a fury so unhinged it would soon turn Kimmel's solo bit into a two-sided war, raw and unrelenting. Word spread fast. Trump had seen the clips, the ones racing across screens with Kimmel's voice slicing through his latest stunt like a blade through paper. The former president didn't sit quietly, didn't let the jab slide off his back as he once might have. Instead, he fired back, his fingers flying over his phone, unleashing a torrent of posts that hit the internet like a shotgun blast. His words were a mess of rage and defiance, calling Kimmel a washed-up hack, a nobody coasting on cheap shots, his insults laced with the kind of venom that only came from a nerve struck deep. The audience in the studio didn't know it yet, but the crew backstage whispered, phones glowing with Trump's tirade, the storm breaking in real time. Kimmel, still on set, shifted gears, his monologue done but his momentum unbroken. He'd planned to move on, maybe toss out a few lighter bits, but the air felt different now, charged with an unseen escalation. Offstage, the reaction was gaining steam. Trump's posts piling up, each one wilder than the last. He didn't just defend his legacy, he swung wildly, accusing Kimmel of jealousy, of rigging the narrative, his caps-locked rants veering into tangents about ratings and crowds. That made little sense. The internet lit up, fans and foes alike jumping in, some cheering Trump's counterattack, others mocking the unraveling they saw in every typo, every frantic line. Kimmel's team scrambled, feeding him updates, the chaos a live wire he couldn't yet touch. The tipping point came when Trump, not content with words, took to a shaky video stream, his face flushed, his voice booming through a phone held too close. He ranted about Kimmel's lies, about a conspiracy of elites out to bury him, his hands waving as if he could swat the comedian from miles away. The feed cut in and out, his fury interrupted by glitches, but the intent was clear. He was losing it. The cool he'd once wielded as a weapon, now a memory. The studio crowd, still oblivious, laughed through Kimmel's next bit. But backstage, the mood shifted. The crew gaping at screens as Trump's meltdown played out. A spectacle that turned Kimmel's roast into prophecy. The host, mid-joke, caught a producer's eye, a nod signaling the storm he'd unleashed, and his grin widened, sensing the victory already taking shape. The Jimmy Kimmel Live studio hummed with a restless buzz as the night rolled on, the audience still riding the high of the opening monologue, their laughter a steady undercurrent to the chaos unfolding beyond their view. Jimmy Kimmel stood at his desk, his demeanor unshaken, a glint of satisfaction flickering in his eyes as whispered updates from the crew filtered through. Donald Trump's unhinged video rant had hit the airwaves, a sloppy, furious rebuttal to Kimmel's roast that was now ricocheting across screens, turning the host's solo jab into a public spectacle. The crowd didn't know the full scope yet, but the energy in the room shifted, as if they could sense the triumph brewing in the shadows. Backstage, the scene was electric. Staffers huddled over phones, their faces a mix of disbelief and glee, as Trump's meltdown played out in real time. The former president's stream had been a disaster, his voice cracking with rage, his words a jumbled mess of insults and boasts, interrupted by stutters and a shaky grip on the camera. He'd tried to reclaim the narrative, to paint Kimmel as a petty clown, but the effort imploded, his fury drowning out any shred of coherence. Online, the clips spread like wildfire, viewers tearing into the rant, some with memes, others with brutal commentary. The consensus growing. Trump wasn't fighting back, he was falling apart. The crew fed Kimmel the highlights, their urgency palpable. Knowing this was gold, he could spin into legend. On stage, Kimmel seized the moment, his instincts kicking in as he pivoted from the planned bits to address the storm he'd sparked. He didn't need a script, didn't pause for approval, just leaned into the mic with a grin that said he'd seen this coming. He recapped Trump's response with a razor's edge, mocking the video's glitches, the wild-eyed tirade, the way it crumbled under its own weight. The audience roared, their laughter a tidal wave, as Kimmel painted Trump as a man undone by his own echo chamber, a king toppled by a jester's barb. He didn't gloat outright, instead letting the absurdity speak, his tone a mix of delight and disbelief that drew the crowd in deeper. The segment became a masterstroke, Kimmel turning Trump's collapse into a live autopsy of ego laid bare. He lingered on the details, the sweat on Trump's brow, the frantic pacing, each quip a fresh cut that had the room gasping, then cheering. The host wove it into a broader point, a jab at those who clung to power past their prime, his humor sharp enough to wound but light enough to keep the crowd with him. The energy surged, the audience united in the takedown, their earlier buzz, now a full-throated roar. By the next break, the night had flipped. What started as Kimmel's lone shot had morphed into Trump handing him the win, a self-inflicted wound that left the host standing tall, the chaos his crown. The final break lifted, and the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio crackled with a vibrant charge, the audience buzzing like a live wire, their energy honed into a razor-sharp focus on Jimmy Kimmel. He stood at his desk, his stance relaxed yet radiating. A quiet command, the kind of poise that came from knowing he'd turned a spark into a blaze. Donald Trump's meltdown, still reverberating across the digital landscape, had handed Kimmel a victory he hadn't even needed to chase, and now, with the night winding down, he was ready to seal it. The crowd, swept up in the saga, watched, with bated breath, eager to see how he'd close a show that had already etched itself into late-night history. Kimmel didn't lean on Trump's name, didn't replay the rant that had collapsed under its own fury. Instead, he steered the spotlight inward, his voice steady as he riffed on the absurdity of it all, the way a single monologue could unravel. A giant. He spoke of resilience, of the power in calling out bluster when it strutted too loud, his words landing with a weight that felt earned, not preachy. The audience hung on, their laughter softer now, thoughtful, as Kimmel peeled back the layers of the night, exposing the fragility beneath the bombast he'd targeted. He didn't need to name the former president. The point was clear, the victory implicit in every measured beat. Offstage, the fallout was a full-blown tempest. Trump's video had become a punching bag, dissected by pundits, mocked by comics, its glitches and rants fueling a tidal wave of ridicule. His team scrambled, tossing out statements to patch the damage, but the narrative had slipped their grasp. Kimmel's initial jab now a cornerstone of a story they couldn't rewrite. Back in the studio, the host brought the night full circle, easing into a lighter bit with the house band, their music a smooth balm after the earlier fire. The crowd swayed, their cheers a warm undercurrent, the tension of the saga melting into a shared triumph they could feel in their bones. As the clock ticked toward the end, Kimmel took his final stand, alone under the lights, his presence filling the space with an effortless authority. He didn't crow about the chaos he'd sparked, didn't need to. His win was in the show itself, a night that had morphed from routine to reckoning without missing a step. He thanked the audience, his tone warm, his eyes glinting with a promise of more nights where truth and laughter collided. The room erupted, a standing ovation that shook the rafters, a roar for a host who'd turned a solo shot into a knockout. The cameras lingered, catching the sea of faces, some still wide-eyed, others beaming, all bound by a story that needed no encore. Beyond the walls, Trump's camp licked its wounds, their man likely plotting a comeback, his silence a temporary retreat. But here, in this moment, the stage was Kimmel's. The night a testament to his unflinching swing. He'd taken a gamble, landed a blow, and watched it ripple into a rout, all without breaking stride. The show closed with no loose threads, no lingering what-ifs, just a clean, triumphant arc that left the crowd sated, their applause a final stamp on a win well-earned. Kimmel waved, the sound washing over him, and the screen faded to black, the tale complete, its echo destined to linger long after the lights went dark.